Business does not operate separately from the natural environment. Every organization interacts with the world around it, depends on resources and ecological systems, and affects those systems through its decisions and operations. This perspective gives us a foundation for understanding modern business strategy. The central idea is responsibility as well as dependence. Organizations must consider not only what the environment provides, but also how their choices influence its future. We'll use this lens to examine key business environments and concepts. Business does not exist in a vacuum. Every organization, from a local bakery to a multinational corporation, depends on the natural environment and affects it in return. Businesses draw inputs such as raw materials, water, energy, and land. Their operations then produce outputs, including waste, emissions, and other byproducts. These exchanges create broader impacts, including climate change, biodiversity loss, and resource depletion. Understanding this relationship is essential because business decisions can either intensify these pressures or help reduce them through more responsible use of resources. The business society environment triangle highlights a central reality. These three systems do not operate independently. Business decisions affect communities and natural resources, while social conditions and environmental health also shape business performance. The key idea is interdependence. When one part comes under stress, the effects can ripple through the entire system. For example, a degraded environment can create social disruption and business instability. Recognizing these connections is the first step toward thinking about sustainability not as a separate initiative, but as a more complete way to make business decisions. Business activity can create several interconnected environmental pressures. Climate change is driven in part by greenhouse gas emissions from energy use and production. At the same time, resource depletion occurs when finite materials, including fossil fuels and minerals, are extracted faster than they can be replaced. Industrial processes can also contaminate the air, water, and soil through pollution. Finally, biodiversity loss results when habitats are destroyed, threatening ecosystems that support life. Together, these impacts show why business decisions must account for environmental limits, not just immediate economic outcomes. Ecosystem services are the essential benefits nature provides, often without appearing on a company's balance sheet. They include provisioning such as food, water, timber, and raw materials, regulating services, including climate stabilization, flood control, and pollination, cultural benefits like tourism and well-being, and supporting processes such as soil formation and nutrient cycling. More than $44 trillion in economic value, over half of global GDP, depends moderately or highly on nature. That means ecosystem decline is not just an environmental concern. It poses a serious risk to entire industries. Corporate environmental responsibility can be understood as a progression through 4 levels. It begins with compliance, or meeting the minimum legal standards established by regulators. The next step is going beyond compliance, voluntarily reducing emissions, waste, and resource use. Strategic integration takes sustainability further by embedding it in the company's core business model and supply chain. Finally, regeneration means actively restoring ecosystems, representing the frontier for leading businesses. The key idea is that responsibility evolves from avoiding violations to creating meaningful environmental value. Business behavior is being shaped by 2 forces at once. Government regulation sets the minimum expectations. Through EPA standards, carbon pricing, cap-and-trade systems, international agreements, and required ESG disclosures. At the same time, market and social pressure is raising the bar. Consumers increasingly seek sustainable products. Investors apply ESG screens and support green bonds, and NGOs and the public hold companies accountable. The result is a dual mandate. Businesses must comply with regulators while earning trust in markets that increasingly reward credible environmental responsibility and punish greenwashing. This slide highlights 4 sustainability frameworks businesses use to turn broad commitments into practical action. The triple bottom line expands success beyond profit to include people and the planet. The circular economy focuses on designing out waste and keeping products and materials in use longer. ESG reporting gives investors environmental, social, and governance information to evaluate long-term risk. Finally, science-based targets connect emissions reduction goals to climate science, including the effort to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Together, these frameworks make sustainability more measurable, accountable, and strategic. This slide presents a strategic choice facing companies as environmental conditions reshape the business landscape. Patagonia and Interface demonstrate that sustainability can deliver more than ethical benefits. It can reduce operating costs, help attract top talent, and strengthen customer loyalty to the brand. The alternative carries its own strategic risks: stranded assets, regulatory penalties, and reputational damage. In other words, environmental responsibility is not separate from business performance. It increasingly shapes whether a company can remain resilient, competitive, and trusted over the long term. Environmental risk is not separate from business risk. It can affect a company in three distinct ways. Physical risk comes from extreme weather that disrupts supply chains, damages facilities, or interrupts daily operations. Transition risk emerges as policies, technologies, and market preferences change, potentially leaving carbon-intensive assets outdated or uneconomical. Finally, liability risk involves legal and financial exposure tied to environmental damage, spills, or inadequate disclosure. Together, these risks show why environmental issues belong in core business planning, not only in sustainability reporting. The key message is that business, society, and nature are inseparable. Nature has economic value because ecosystem services support global economic activity. Environmental responsibility is also strategic, reducing risk and encouraging innovation. Ultimately integrated, sustainable business models are essential for long-term viability, not simply an optional ideal.